I'm preparing to remove the rack and pinion from underneath my car. And before I can do that, I have to split the joint where the steering shaft comes onto the rack and pinion shaft, if you want to call it that. And I have read on the forums where people have a terrible time trying to split this joint off. So what I've decided to do is I'm going to build a special puller to do that job. Now, step number one in doing this job is to remove the bolt that you no longer see here. I've already taken that bolt out, labeled it so we find it again, and that releases this joint so that it can be pulled off. Quite often what you would do then is you would put a little bit of a screwdriver in this split and you would try to spread those apart in order to relieve the tightness of that joint and allow it to come off. But I think we're just going to go with the special puller and not worry about that. So some information I need in order to build this puller. We need the diameter of that center shaft. We're going to use our dial calipers and we come out with around 700,000. I'm going to make a little diagram right here and document this. 0.7 for that. We have a bit of a rubber seal, kind of a dust cap, I guess you'd call it. And I want to be outside of that with my next dimension, just because I don't want to destroy that seal. Well, I have 1.95, 1.925. I'm going to call that 2 inches even. I want to clear 2 inches. And then the outside of the entire cap, if you will, is somewhere around 2.7. And I think that's sort of a triangular shaped cap. So that 2.7 is going to vary. And I'm going to make 2 points about where I have my measure, 2.7. And we're going to take that into consideration. Now, in order to separate this coupler from the shaft, I have to slide it up at least the thickness of the coupler. And I see just a little bit of shaft sticking out on the top, but if we slide it up the thickness of that coupler, I think I'll be able to wiggle it off. So let's figure out what that is. I can get a rough dimension, about 5/8. So we need to go at least 5/8. And underneath there, we have a very limited amount of space that we can fit this puller into. And I can't truly get my calipers down in there to measure because of this motor mount. But I can come pretty close. If we had, I'd like to go a little more than that. Let's see if that will fit. Yeah, okay. I think we can get about 0.3 on thickness, 300 thousandths. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go inside, drop a little bit of a blueprint, and then we're going to just make this puller up. What we have to work with on this 944 is we have a cap that's shaped sort of like this. And in each corner of this cap, is a bolt. Now down the center is the shaft, and around that is a dust cap. This dust cap had a diameter of approximately 2 inches. I measured across from about here to about here approximately, and the diameter there was about 2.7 inches. This shaft in the middle had a diameter of 0.7. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a puller. I'm going to draw it out here. What we're going to do is we're going to create a puller, and in the middle we're going to do this of 0.7 wide. Now this depth here has to be at least 0.350. And I'm going to shoot more for a ½ inch. Now out here we're going to put 2 screw jacks, and these screw jacks have to be inside of 2.7, and outside of 2 inch. So we'll pick a number. They can be right on the outside edge of 2.7. There's no reason they can't sit just like that on the edge. What we don't want to do is pinch this seal, we'll ruin it. But we can sit on the edge here, and if I have to turn this puller a little bit one way or the other in order to clear these bolts, then I can do that. There's a little bit of leeway, you can spin it back and forth. So we're going to pull somewhere around, we're going to use a 1/4 inch fine thread bolt, fine thread. So that would be a 1/4 inch 20, I think that is. I'll double check that, but I think it's a 1/4 inch 20. And so we need to be no less than 1/8 of an inch in on each side, which would be half the diameter of that bolt. So no less than. Actually, we need to be more than that because, well, we just need some meat outside. That's fine. So if I take a 1/4 of an inch off of 2.7, that takes me down to about 2.5. If I went about 2.4 inches from center to center of these bolts, so that's 1.2 on each side of center. So if we take the center, each one will be plus or minus 1.2 inches. And there we have the gist of our puller. So to draw it out, make it clear, I've sort of made a mess of it. If we make a puller like this, if we put a 0.7 width by 0.5 depth, if we come from center, and if to the center of here is 1.2 plus or minus on either side, then we should have something to work with. Now the thickness of this puller is about 0.3 max. So any piece of 1/4 inch stock would work fine. I wouldn't go probably any thinner than 1/4 inch because I need a certain amount of strength in order to shove that fitting up. So let's see what kind of scrap we have laying around and we'll go from there. Just a little discussion of materials. I found this piece of scrap. This is a wafer off a piece of round bar. It's actually too thick. I'm going to have to grind it down, but we're going to use it. I'll make the effort to do the grinding to fit it in. The bolts I'm going to use, I said the wrong thing. They're not quarter 20, they're quarter 28. 28 is a fine thread. So this particular bolt is a grade 5 bolt. I would use no less than grade 5. If you used a grade 8, you'd probably be better off. Any kind of a press bolt should probably be a grade 8, but this is what I have available, so this is what we're going to use. You can tell this is a grade 5 because it has 3 hash marks on the head, and 3 hash marks means grade 5. If it has 6 hash marks, that's grade 8, and that would be a preferable. You can buy these bolts at Lowe's, Ames True Value, probably Home Depot has them. We have the correct tap for the bolt. And we have, in this particular case, a 7/32 drill bit, which we're going to use as the correct size for a fine thread 1/4 inch. And in just a minute, we'll lay it out on this, and then we'll go make our puller. Normally on a job like this, when you lay it out, you would take your raw stock and you would hit it with some bluing. But in lack of bluing, I have used some magic marker. We've put a little, just a little color on that metal that we can scratch with. Now typically you would use precision scales or something like that, but we're going to use my dial calipers for the whole job. I think for what we're doing it's close enough. We have about a 3.5 inch width. We want to find center. Right now, quick and dirty, we're going to go to 1 3/4 right there. Right there, we're going to snub that up. And we're going to put a little scratch on center, just like that. That's close enough for what we're doing now. We are 1.2 inches each side of center for our hole locations, for our jacking screws. So we lay that down right on our center mark right there, and I'm going to scratch right here. If you have a good scratch awl, feel free to use it. My good scratch awl is not here right now. 2.4 inches is a total width. Hole center to hole center. We're going to lock that down. We're going to lay that on our other hole center. And we're going to scratch right here. All right, that's close enough for what we're going to need here. Now, across the middle, we're going to kind of just pick an arbitrary line here, and we're going to adjust that arbitrary line. Here is a scratch. Here is a scratch. Here somewhere, right there is my center. So I have plenty of meat here for my bolt to go through, and plenty of meat here. I have at least 1/2 inch here. I don't know what I have, more like 1 inch probably, but we're going to end up cutting some of this away. And we'll get into that later, but for the immediate moment, let's put a scratch down across here. Just like that. All right, what we have is 3 points. And I'm going to take this out in the garage, and I'm going to use a prick punch, and I'm going to put a punch mark right there, and right there. And that will be the center and our 2 jacking screws. When we're done drilling this and tapping this, we're going to cut this off. I need somewhere around like that, and I need somewhere around this much up here. Now my holes are going to be here and here. Not that big, but that's going to give me enough room. So if I cut this off here, I may even want to go a little closer than that. If I cut this off here, and then if I came on this side and cut this off somewhere around there, I would have plenty of meat probably for that tool to do its job, and I'll get rid of all this extra. So that's probably what we're going to do. We might cut this a little bit here and a little bit like that just to smooth it up, or I may not even bother. We'll see what happens, but that's the gist of what we're up to. After you have laid out your piece of metal, get yourself a nice punch and make some nice punch marks where you're going to drill. That way your location will be pretty close to accurate. Just like that, and you're good to go. It took me a while to dig my drill press out from beneath a pile of 944 parts and 1947 Ford pickup parts. But regardless, I've dug it out. I have my piece of metal mounted in my drill vise, and I've lined up on my first hole. And now I'm going to swap, put that right there. I'm going to swap to a 7/32 drill bit, which is the correct size for a 1/4 28 bolt. Let me get just a little bit of cutting fluid. What I use for cutting fluid right here is just a little bit of Mobile 1 80/90 gear oil that I keep in a nice little sister salsa tub. Let's see what happens. Alright, that is through. And what I'm going to do is, before I move this, I'm going to put a little countersink in there. With this. We'll mount that as far down as I can because it only just barely reaches. Just like that. We're going to put just a little bit of a countersink in. And then I'm going to start my tap down through right now while I'm all lined up. Put that down where I'm sure to lose it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to chuck this tap up right like this. And I'm going to lower it down in there. Let me put just a little bit of fluid on the end of that, just like that. Lower it down in there like this. And then I'm going to turn by hand. I better chuck that up a little bit if I'm going to turn by hand. I want to loosen up. Alright, we'll lower that down in there. And then I'm going to turn by hand. And this will give me enough of a thread. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to loosen that in place. Just like that. And just let that go up. Then I'm going to get my tap handle out. I'm going to get my small size tap handle right now. And I'm going to finish this thread right here. Just like that. Well, it's all lined up, so that I don't struggle to get that lined up later. Just like that. And we're through. And we're going to go down into the wood just a little bit so that we know we have a nice clear thread all the way, which I think we do. Let's bring that back out of there. Just like that. All right, and on to the next hole. I am unable to find a 3/4 inch drill bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a 5/8 inch hole saw. I couldn't find a 3/4 inch hole saw either. I don't know what I'm doing with my 3/4 inch, but regardless, I'm going to hole saw it out to 5/8, and then if I need to, I'll take my Dremel tool and I would just grind it out a little bit. So we're all good to go. Let's hole saw. I see wood, so we're through. All right, with all that done, take that sucker out. I hate hole saw, and that's why. And we're through. All right, so there's the basic. I brought out one of my jacking bolts. Just like that. That goes right through. All right. Basically, those holes need to be just cleaned out. So now we need to cut. We need to cut it off here. We need to cut it out here and here. Probably trim off this edge here. I may not bother with that. I may grind just a little. I don't know. We'll see. But so cut is up next. All right, we're going to use our cut-off wheel on our grinder here to cut this to shape. When you do something like this, use a proper face shield and a good pair of gloves. You want to be safe. Let's get ourselves started. We've cleaned all flammables out of the way, anything that's major flammable. I'll probably get that plastic bag out of there, but let's dig in. After I cut off the excess, then I snipped out here to bring into our hole. I had to do a little grinding in order to make it fit. I've done a test fit in there and it seemed to be all right. My 2 jacking bolts have been installed. One of them's just a little bit tight. They spin by hand. They're pretty good. That one spins around nicely. So what I need to do now is just plain put it in place and give it a try. I screwed in my 2 jacking bolts as far as the thread would allow, and it wasn't quite enough to pop the coupler off the top of the shaft. So I backed the bolts off and I put in the spacers, as you can see right here. And now I'm going to take another stab at it and see what we can do. All right, I had my press pretty well lined up in there with a couple of spacers. We're going to go for the last little bit of that coupling. It just popped and released. Yep, and there it is. All right, so that coupler is apart. Just as simple as that. All right, so here we have a very simple little press made up to split that coupling apart, which it did quite handily.